Welcome to a true story of love and reconciliation. James and Diep. 2 years separated only one final chance in Dalat, the city of fog. James pleads for forgiveness. Diep gives him 1 week to stop running from himself. Their love seemed to be resurrected on a small boat on Tu Diep Lake. But just as trust began to bloom, a mysterious note appeared. He hasn't changed. He's just stalling. It turns out the breakdown didn't stem from coldness, but from a life or death secret James had been hiding. Who is the watcher? What is threatening them? Can Diep ever trust James again, when her life and their daughter's future hang in the balance? Follow this dramatic journey now. If the story of Diep and James's choice and courage touches your heart, don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow their entire journey of rebuilding happiness from scratch. The moment they realized they'd been photographed on the boat on Tu Diep Lake, a moment that felt like the most private and safest completely shattered the illusion of peace. The note was a warning. The photo was undeniable proof the enemy was incredibly close and had been watching them with chilling patience. Diep felt a deep chill in her bones. She was no longer a wife waiting for reconciliation. She was a mother protecting her child. She looked at James, her eyes no longer holding accusation, but absolute cooperation. "We need to leave," Diep said, her voice chillingly decisive. "Not run, but move strategically. If they think you're just stalling, they'll expect us to go back to the city. That's the last place we should go." James nodded. He sensed the shift in Diep. The anger had transformed into strength. It was what he had lost, and now he admired it. "Hometown," James said softly. "We go back to the hometown." The idea felt like a release, a psychological escape. That place held no trace of the company's collapse or the whispers of the past. It was neutral ground where everyone knew them, and the protection of the community was real. "Yes," Diep agreed, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Back to the fishing village, where we don't need to lock the doors, where Nien can run barefoot on the sand again without fear. We'll use this quiet time in Dalat to plan." They spent the next 2 days creating a phantom plan for their watcher. James made a phone call to an old friend in the city, speaking loudly about how he and Diep would return immediately to face the allegations a lie. He intentionally kept Diep close while talking, ensuring the watcher, if listening in, would believe they were heading back to the center of the problem. Diep quietly booked train tickets south the opposite direction from the city instead of their usual plane tickets. They packed only the essentials, leaving most of their old luggage at the guest house, giving the impression they would return for it later. On the 7th night of their stay in Dalat, after Nien had fallen asleep, James and Diep sat by the fireplace again. The silence was no longer avoidance, but protection, a safe space to share unspoken fears. "I destroyed the company, Diep," James confessed, his voice trembling. "If I go back to the countryside, I have nothing. I have no savings, no career." Diep reached out and took his hand. For the first time, she initiated the touch with complete understanding. "You destroyed the company to protect your daughter. That wasn't destruction, James. That was sacrifice." She looked deep into his eyes. "I have a little savings from my side jobs. Not much, but enough for us to start. and we have time. That's something the city doesn't have. We will start over. Start over. How? James asked, the self-doubt from his great failure still weighing on him. You told me you wished for a smaller, slower life. Diep reminded him, her voice gentle but firm. In the countryside, we'll make that real. You are a talented programmer. I know how to manage and connect. We'll open an online craft shop combined with a book cafe. You'll build the website. I'll manage the products. We will raise our daughter with peace, not haste. James was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. That's a dream I had forgotten. They didn't sleep that night. They sketched out their first business plan on a napkin. The shared focus on a positive goal chased away the phantom of the mysterious person. The next morning, Dalat was still shrouded in fog, but this time, it no longer felt romantic or threatening. It was a necessary veil. They left the guest house at 4 a.m. James carried the deeply sleeping Nie in. Diep walked close beside him, a light backpack on her shoulder. They walked through the deserted, sloping streets, feeling like fugitives. Yet their minds were filled with relief. They weren't afraid of being caught. They were afraid of being seen too easily. At the train station, Diep carefully bought 2 extra tickets for a later train, just to ensure that anyone following would be misled. James watched her act a newfound respect for her calmness and sharp thinking welling up inside him. I didn't realize you were so good at handling a crisis, James whispered as they stepped onto the train. Diep let out a small, soft laugh. I used to deal with our breakdown all by myself. Now that you're here, at least I have one person I can trust. The train rolled away. Dalat receded behind them, taking with it the fragile piece, the threat of the mysterious person, and the wounds that had just begun to heal. The long journey brought them to a small coastal town where life operated on the rhythm of the tide. This was Diep's hometown. The first thing James did, stepping off the vehicle, was take a deep breath. It wasn't the smell of pine or car exhaust, but the smell of sea salt fish and damp earth. It was the smell of truth, completely genuine. My mother's house, Diep said, pointing to a small wooden house with bright bougainvillea vines. We'll stay there. The welcome from Diep's family, surprised but incredibly warm, was an immediate balm. Diep's mother didn't ask what had happened. She just hugged her daughter tightly and said, "It's good that you're home." James was no longer the successful CEO dealing with loss of control. He was a father seeking redemption. He bent down to fix the house's broken door lock, installed a new Wi-Fi network, and constantly helped with odd jobs. He didn't say much. He was simply present and serving. They started immediately. There was no time for grief or fear. Diep found a small space next to the beach. It was an old house looking out at the ocean. Slow down. A name Diep chose to remind James and herself of the biggest lesson they learned in Dalat. James threw himself into the work. He wasn't building financial algorithms anymore. He was building a simple but beautiful e-commerce website where Diep could sell local handicrafts, woven bags, seashells, paintings, and promote books about minimalist, mindful living. In the evenings, after Nien was asleep, James and Diep sat side by side, not by the fireplace, but on the steps overlooking the night sea. I don't remember the last time I felt my hands this useful, James said, gently, massaging his newly calloused palms. That's because you're building something that is truly ours, Diep replied. Not an empire, but a life. A month passed. The Slow Down shop opened its doors. The sound of coffee grinding Nien's laughter and the ocean waves became their family's new symphony. Diep watched James. He woke up early to run on the beach, then made her coffee. He worked on the computer, but was no longer obsessed. When she called, he looked up immediately fully present. One afternoon, a customer placed an online order. It was their first sale. James and Diep looked at each other. We did it, James whispered. We are doing it, Diep corrected him. We don't need one big moment to know we've reconciled. We reconcile every day, every order, every moment you stay. That night, they stood on the balcony, the sea breeze blowing around them. About the mystery person, Diep said quietly. I reported it to my former lawyer, James said. He thinks that our complete disappearance from the city's radar, starting a new business in a place no one expected, is the best safety measure. That person wants to ruin me, but I ruined myself in my own way. When they find me, they'll find a different man who has started from zero and has nothing left to lose. Diep wasn't afraid. We learned one thing in Dalat, James. Silence isn't disguised indifference. It's the necessary stillness to rebuild. She turned to James. I haven't forgotten everything, and I don't think I ever will. But I've stopped running from the fear of being hurt again. And you have proven that you are no longer running from yourself. That is enough for a start. James made no grand promises. He just wrapped his arms around her, this time in true intimacy, without the caution of the early days. We will build this life one day at a time, Diep, he said into her hair. Together, they stood there, watching the fishing boat lights blinking on the sea. They didn't need a magical answer from the city of fog. The answer was right here in the smell of salt, in the sound of the waves, and in their courageous choice to slow down, to start over from the most basic things, and to choose the fragility of truth over the protection of silence. After 1 year, the Slow Down shop thrived. James didn't just build the website. He created a small application that helped local fishermen track the weather. He found true meaning in using his talent to serve the community. One day, Nien ran into the house holding a dried leaf. Mom, Uncle James, look. It was a large, brilliant red banyan leaf, a typical sign of the hometown autumn. James smiled, stroking his daughter's hair. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Diep looked at the leaf. It wasn't the deep green pine needle of Dalat, but it possessed a brilliant and resilient beauty. It is, she said. The banyan tree isn't afraid of the sea wind, James. It sheds its leaves to make way for new buds. It teaches us that an ending can also be a beautiful beginning. James looked at Diep. We left the pine trees behind, he said, and we found the banyan tree. Thank you for giving me the chance to rebuild a new garden. They chose to stay. They chose the fresh start. Reconciliation wasn't about forgetting the past. but about accepting the fragility of the present and facing the future together with no more silence between them. They had lived in the hometown for almost 6 months. The Slow Down Cafe had become a small beacon by the shore, where locals and tourists found peace and exquisite handicrafts. James, as the system developer, and Diep, as the soul of the shop, created a perfect partnership. The shattered big career forced James to focus on the small things, and those small things healed him. On a late weekend afternoon, when the shop was busy, a shiny black car, completely out of place, among the crude motorbikes and bicycles pulled up in front. A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped out. It was Mr. William Bill Harding, James's father. He was a successful businessman, always familiar with large boardrooms and the constant hustle of the city. James was organizing a new shipment. He looked up and froze. The relationship between him and his father had always been one of cold respect. His father never forgave failure, and James had isolated himself since the company's collapse. "Father," James said, softly, surprise evident in his voice. Mr. Bill didn't answer immediately. He stood there, his sharp eyes sweeping over everything from the hand-painted wooden sign of the shop to the vibrant bougainvillea pot, then stopping at Diep. Diep was, at the counter, laughing with an elderly customer, her hair blowing in the sea wind, her eyes radiant. She was no longer the stressed, reserved Diep of the city. She was the Diep of the waves and the open sky. When the customer left, Diep saw Mr. Bill. She showed no fear or awkwardness. She approached him smiling. "Welcome, sir. It's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of seeing you here." Mr. Bill, known for his brevity, simply nodded. "Diep, are you well?" "I'm better than ever, sir," she answered truthfully. "Would you like coffee or tea?" Mr. Bill raised an eyebrow, slightly, as if this answer was not in the script he had prepared. "Black coffee, no sugar." Mr. Bill sat down at a small wooden table facing the sea. James hesitantly sat across from his father. The silence between them was tense, but this time it wasn't due to James's avoidance, but deep-seated apprehension. Mr. Bill spent half an hour just observing. He said nothing about the old company or the scandal. He just watched. He saw James was no longer the man constantly looking at his watch and phone. He patiently explained how to use a tablet to an old woman. He bent down to tie Nien's shoe, and his gaze toward Diep always held absolute gratitude and respect. Mr. Bill watched Diep handle a tricky situation. A tourist complained about the price. Instead of arguing, Diep offered them a glass of water, listened, and calmly explained the value of the local handmade product. She wasn't just managing a cafe. She was building a community. Finally, Mr. Bill put his coffee cup down. "I've been watching you, Diep," he said bluntly, without preamble. Diep sat up straight. "I understand, sir, not in a threatening way. But watching the work," he clarified. "You took my failed aimless son, and in 6 months, you've helped him find himself again in this mess." He turned to James. "You sold out major partners, James. You were marginalized. When you ran into silence, I thought you would never get up. But you came back here, you started over from scratch, and more importantly, you are no longer a shadow of yourself." James took a deep breath. I learned, Father, that silence is not strength. Presence is strength. And I learned that from Diep. Mr. Bill nodded. What did Dalat teach you? It taught me how to breathe. James replied. It taught me how to slow down and see that my value isn't in a bank account or a business card. It's in her and our daughter. After a moment of silence, Mr. Bill took out a thick envelope. He pushed it toward Diep, not James. This is cash, he said. No paperwork, no strings attached. Diep didn't touch the envelope. She looked at Mr. Bill with a searching gaze. I don't need money, Diep said with composure. We built everything ourselves. I don't want any help that creates the illusion that everything can be bought, sir. Mr. Bill smiled a rare and warm smile. You misunderstand me, he said. This is not money to buy forgiveness. This is an investment. I've seen how you manage this shop. I've seen how effectively James built the online sales system. My son is a brilliant programmer, trapped in a micro business. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. James's enemies are still out there. Your being here is safety, but you can't live in the shadows forever. I want you to expand the business, create an official company, a legitimate corporation, so James can use his intellect again without being threatened. He pointed to the envelope. This amount is enough for you to hire more staff, expand the craft production workshop, and build a solid legal barrier for the new company. This is an investment from a father in his son's future in a healthy business model I haven't seen before. Mr. Bill looked straight into Diep's eyes. I don't believe in easy forgiveness, Diep, but I believe in effort. You gave him the motivation to make the effort. Now use this investment to turn that effort into stability. Diep looked at James. James nodded, gratitude and emotion evident in his eyes. He knew this wasn't money. It was acceptance from his harsh father. What should we do with this money? Diep asked James, completely bypassing Mr. Bill. This was their decision. James smiled. We will hire a good lawyer to protect the business and the family, and we will expand the workshop. We will take the work of the local artisans to the world. Diep turned to Mr. Bill, taking the envelope. Thank you, sir. I accept this investment, and we will use it to build something that I, James, and Nian can be proud of. With solid financial backing from James's father, their life in the hometown moved into a new phase stable growth. They named the new company Harding and Diep Slow Living. James was able to focus entirely on building a professional e-commerce platform, ensuring security and scalability. He had truly found meaning in applying his complex skills to a simple, positive goal. Diep, as the CEO, built relationships with dozens of local artisans, turning simple products into unique gifts that carried the story of the sea. Publicly establishing the new company was also a measure of protection. The enemy wanted James to disappear or fail, but James did the opposite. He reappeared successful in a different way, legal and transparent. One evening, Diep and James sat on the beach, watching Nian trying to build a giant sandcastle. Do you think your father has forgiven you? Diep asked softly. James chuckled slightly. Father is not one for forgiveness, Diep. He is one for recognition. He recognized my change, and he recognized your choice. To him, that is a bigger deal than forgiveness. What happened to our worries about the mystery person? Diep asked the fear lessened, but not entirely gone. The lawyer says that when I form the new company and made my presence public, it becomes harder for the enemy to harm me secretly, James said. They wanted a secret war. I'm inviting them out into the light if they're brave enough. James turned to Diep. But more importantly, Diep, I'm ready to fight. Before I had nothing to protect but my ego. Now I have you, Nien, and this business. I have a life worth fighting for. This isn't a repair. This is a new beginning with no pressure, only choice. James continued. We can make things happily ever after. He repeated Nien's innocent words from days past. Diep felt tears welling up. She was no longer crying out of hurt or fear. She cried out of relief and love. The ring wasn't materialistic. It was a symbol of their shared effort. You don't need to apologize or explain, James, she said, her voice trembling. You just need to stay. I will stay, James promised, forever. Then, Diep smiled radiantly, taking his hand. Yes, I will. Let's do this again. This time, not out of obligation, but because we choose each other after seeing the worst and the best parts of one another. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, James and Diep held a small, intimate, cozy wedding by the sea. There were no fancy hotels or long guest lists from the business world. There were only family and their closest friends, the local artisans and neighbors who had supported them in the beginning. Diep wore a simple wedding dress adorned with local hand-embroidered lace. James wore a relaxed and modest white linen suit. Nien, now a more understanding little girl, held her parents' hands, carrying the 2 wedding rings. James's father, Mr. Bill, stood there not giving a lengthy speech. He simply watched them exchange vows, and in his eyes there was no longer judgment but profound pride. Their vows didn't speak of grand things, but of the sincere truths. I vow never to use silence as a shield again. I vow to speak the truth, no matter how broken it may be. I vow to choose you, choose the slow pace, and choose presence for the rest of my life. I vow to forgive the mistakes of the past, not because I forget, but because I choose to trust the man you have become. I vow to always be your ally, your partner, and we will build this life together with patience and courage. As they shared their first kiss, after remarrying, the sound of the ocean waves seemed like applause for a new beginning. After the ceremony, James and Diep walked along the shore with Nien. Diep picked up a large banyan leaf and placed it in James's hand. We didn't run away, Diep said, squeezing his hand. We chose to stay. We chose to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability became our greatest strength. James smiled. And we proved that a love that was broken doesn't have to be replaced. It needs to be rebuilt on the firm foundation of truth and patience. They stood there, looking out at the vast ocean, where the sun was setting, painting the sky red. They didn't know what challenges tomorrow would bring, perhaps a business crisis, perhaps retaliation from the past, or just ordinary troubles. But this time, they weren't afraid, because they had learned that the most important thing is not avoiding the storm, but standing together in it. they had a new life, smaller, slower, but entirely their own.